Welcome to Baltimore. We're the BFED team. BFED, BFED, stands for Baltimore Food Ecology Documentary. Some of us are new to the city, while some of us have lived here our whole lives. We've been brought together by a mutual love and fascination for food and for Baltimore, and by the Maryland Institute College of Art, where we first met and where this project begins. We want to find out what it means to eat in Baltimore. What we want to know is how food gets to our plate, about the mechanics behind food production and distribution, where it comes from, what impact our diet has on the city, the environment, and the world. We never could have imagined what we were about to discover. This is our story. We were able to spend some time with an expert on the history of food in Baltimore. If anyone knows Baltimore's food culture, it's John Shields. He's a chef, the host of the TV show Coastal Cooking, and the author of many great cookbooks about the Chesapeake Bay. We caught up with him at his restaurant, Gertrude's, in the Baltimore Museum of Art.
It was ugly. It really was ugly. Baltimore was an industrial city, and it also was one of the largest ports in the country. Well, the Chesapeake is known all over the world, and it's equated with seafood. If we go back to the sage H.L. Mencken, he called it a great protein factory. Millions of bushels of oysters were going out every year. So Baltimore really was a hub, a center of feeding the whole country at one point.
The city of Baltimore was once a food hub, receiving food from all over the world and then shipping it out to much of the Northeast. But what about the Baltimoreans of this era? Where did they get their food?
Where most people shopped were Baltimore's municipal markets. So they were the first municipal market system in the country. They all started outside, and as the years progressed, they decided, maybe we should have a roof over this. And then a little bit longer, they said, well, maybe we should have some running water here, or a little heat. And that's how they evolved, those farmers markets. So there's a long history in Baltimore of having these markets, these local markets.
Baltimore has changed a lot since the days of municipal markets. The heavy industry's gone, the factories are gone, and if you're going to see anything bobbing in the Inner Harbor, it's more likely to be trash than watermelons. While some of the municipal markets have closed their doors, there are 7 that are still thriving. Lexington Market is a Baltimore City landmark, but anymore these markets sell mostly fast food, not groceries. Just outside the city, in Baltimore County, people do their shopping at supermarkets like Wegmans and Superfresh. Mediocre public transportation makes it difficult for most Baltimoreans to access these county stores. But with a population of around 640,000 people, Baltimore City is capable of supporting supermarkets within its borders. Take a quick drive through Charm City, though, and you'll see that supermarkets are few and far between. So where are all the supermarkets? We talked to Mark Winnie, a food policy activist and organizer. Winnie has over 40 years' experience in food policy issues and is the author of Closing the Food Gap, a book dedicated to understanding where our food comes from and where it goes.
The supermarket industry, the big retail chain supermarkets, for instance, pretty much abandoned urban areas. Starting in the late 1960s. The demographics of urban America were changing. They were becoming poor. They were becoming more African American, Hispanic, and other minority groups that supermarkets didn't feel comfortable marketing to.
Areas like Baltimore City that have experienced this flight of supermarkets have a name: food deserts.
About 20 million Americans live in food deserts. And these are mostly lower income Americans. Food deserts have very few options. They're basically both urban neighborhoods and rural communities as well, where if you have any supermarkets at all, they tend to be lower quality, higher priced, much smaller, selections of food which are much less than you would find at, say, one of the more upscale suburban supermarkets.
Joyce Smith, a community food advocate, spoke to us about the reality of food deserts in Baltimore. She is currently wrapping up a 3-year Open Society Institute fellowship that she was awarded for her work with food systems in Southwest Baltimore.
Southwest Baltimore has some of the highest chronic health conditions. The health conditions included diabetes, high blood pressure, and obesity. I became involved when I saw the numbers, and the numbers were so high for Southwest Baltimore. I began to look around and say, what is the problem? And one of the things that, regardless of what community I was in, I could see that it has to be connected to the diet. When I look at Southwest Baltimore today compared to when I moved into that neighborhood, we had local people who sold produce. In a lot of the food deserts, you don't have those choices. The corner grocery stores, 95% of the stuff that they sell is canned. And when I look at the community, we have an overabundance of processed foods or convenient foods.
As a barren food desert, Baltimore does not have enough food for everyone, and what little food it does have, canned, processed, and fast, is making the city sick. The problems of processed food are not unique to Baltimore. The American diet changed dramatically in the middle of the last century. Greg Strilla, the head farmer of the Baltimore City Schools Great Kids Farm, talked with us about the transformation of the American food system.
In the 60s or the 50s, we could as a culture say that we're gonna grow huge monocrops, ship them around the world, process them into frozen food that we're gonna franchise out to communities all over the place with mega billion-dollar marketing campaigns, and we're gonna get people to eat it instead of cooking food at home and growing their own garden, and we're gonna make billions of dollars on that. That must have seemed like a ridiculous goal at the time. But that's what we live in right now.
To see this modern, processed, heavy food system in action, we talked to Rob Santoni of Santoni's Supermarket in Highlandtown.
But what the average consumer doesn't realize is, for $1, how many hands have touched this? You know, just a simple example, and I'm not saying that's the true numbers on this, but if we make 20 cents on this can, maybe 15 cents, that leaves 80 to 85 cents that has to go back to Del Monte to pay them for the product, to Super Value to get it to me, to the farmer, to the workers that canned it, to our workers like Purcell who have to freight this product at night and build these displays, and then the cashier to have to bring it out. It's amazing how far that dollar can be sliced.
The peas in the Del Monte can went from the farm to the factory, where they were processed and canned, to the wholesaler Super Value, who put the cans on a truck for Santoni's store. Like many of the processed foods at Santoni's, the Del Monte can came to the supermarket through a wholesale giant that serves a national base of customers. In this case, Super Value, a Fortune 500 company headquartered in Minnesota. Minnesota was a little too far for any of us to travel, so to get an idea of how a wholesaler works, we traced Santoni's produce and seafood back to the Maryland Food Center Authority, the MFCA, a wholesale center in Jessup, just southwest of Baltimore City. There we talked to two wholesale vendors, Kuzman's Produce and NAFCO. In Kuzman's distribution center, we saw boxes and boxes of produce from Florida, Canada, Mexico, Honduras, Guatemala, even Thailand. NAFCO, one of the largest regional distributors of fresh and frozen seafood on the East Coast, sources its products from similarly distant regions.
The seafood business is very much international. Solidly 50% plus of what we do is imported product. So while we'll take rockfish or bluefish or croakers out of the Chesapeake Bay, fillet those, sell those whole, whatever the form the customer wants them in, we'll also bring swordfish out of Trinidad, tuna out of South Africa, sardines out of the Mediterranean, snappers out of Mexico, out of Suriname, out of Trinidad, out of Colombia, places like that. We'll take those products, import them into the United States, bring them into JFK, bring them into Dulles, bring them into national airports, bring them back to our facilities here, and then change the form of them.
In a city home to the largest estuary in North America, the Chesapeake Bay, we were surprised to find that most of the fish and seafood Baltimoreans consume comes from all over the world, and that produce and seafood that we thought were unprocessed underwent big transformations at the MFCA.
The greatest transformation, and a lot of times where you can find the best profits, is going to be in that retail transformation, where you're taking something and then putting it on the supermarket shelf.
And essentially the art of packaging
things for retail is multifaceted. Some of it's the feel-good factor. I think that there's a certain segment of people that feel good when they can go to a store and buy something that looks fancy, that looks gourmet, that looks exciting, you know, the colors and the pop that make it look like something fun, you know what I mean? And it makes it easier to manipulate, easier to manage, and it makes it safer in a certain respect to the consumer because it's not as handled.
So what you'll see as you're walking through these markets is all that activity, trucks being unloaded, fish coming into individual cutting stations and packing stations, and then the conversion of fish from whole fish to steaks, fillets, or portion-controlled finished cuts going back out.
Even foods that are relatively unprocessed have to be shipped from all over the world in planes, trains, and trucks to Jessup, Maryland before reaching consumers in Baltimore City. As fossil fuels rapidly disappear, we're forced to seek fuel in more and more politically and geographically risky areas. The potential for disruption to this fossil fuel dependent system grows. Wouldn't it be easier and far less risky to eat food that's grown and raised closer to Baltimore City? Do we really have to import our food from so far away?
For us, where we're situated here in the Baltimore market, the biggest growing area close to here that would have a diversity of products is going to be New Jersey. The unfortunate thing with being as far north as we are is that seasonality tends to either force you to look further afield for products simply because they're not year-round available locally, or to limit your availabilities and not provide anything that's out of season.
Americans expect year-round availability. Today, it's perfectly normal to have apples, bananas, and greens even in the dead of winter. John Shields and local farmer David Smith discuss another way in which our modern food system has changed the American diet.
We never used to have so much protein. We didn't eat per capita so much fish traditionally, or so much meat, or so much chicken. That was the rich people's diet. Most people ate that in little bits. They went into like maybe a big one-pot dish. You put a little crab in, or maybe a ham hock, and that would feed 10, 12, 16 people off of that one thing.
We as a population eat far too many meats, and I'm not putting down the eating of meat. So if you think of re-educating the population in terms of meat consumption, there's plenty of vegetable production. So I should come back and say, if you want to be a vegetarian, you can probably get just about anything you want locally in season, but you'd have to can it and freeze it to have it through the winter.
The over-reliance on protein not only harms the health of individuals, but reduces our ability to produce an adequate amount of food for our population. As you climb the food chain, there's less and less energy available to us as omnivores. More people can be fed by an acre of land that's used to grow grains, for example, than by the few cows that eat that acre of grain. What if we changed our expectations about food? What if we were more aware of the foods that were available to us in our own area each season? What if we ate less meat and more fruits, vegetables, and grains? Would it be possible to eat local food in Baltimore City that hasn't traveled hundreds or thousands of miles? To find out what local seasonal food is available in Baltimore City, we headed to the Waverly Farmers Market. We could tell from the cardboard boxes stacked behind a few of the stalls that some of the food was coming from the MFCA, just like the produce available in Santoni's supermarket. But there were plenty of farmers and bakers selling food produced in Maryland and Pennsylvania. And although the Waverly Farmers Market is the only farmers market that's open year-round, there are 11 farmers markets in the city during late spring, summer, and early fall. Are these farmers markets a viable alternative to the complex processed industrial food system? A lot of the products at the Waverly Farmers Market are reasonably priced, even cheaper than produce available at most supermarkets. But the market offers a lot of pricey specialty items targeting the upper and middle classes. In 2008, 19.2% of Baltimore City's population was below the poverty level. Although Baltimore City's farmers markets are beginning to accept food stamps and EBT cards, the crowd at the Waverly Farmers Market did not represent the racial and socioeconomic diversity of Baltimore City. Is there any way that the majority of Baltimoreans can be provided with fresh, local produce? We spoke with Joyce Smith about a project she's currently working on that aims to do just that. Joyce Smith recently received funding for a Southwest Baltimore urban agriculture program incorporating a CSA. CSA stands for Community Supported Agriculture. It's a program where members of a community buy into a farm at the beginning of the season in exchange for weekly deliveries of fresh produce. Joyce's program also incorporates hands-on lessons for children.
I see this urban ag program is not just to make the children aware, but how to make the families aware and giving them some real information on this is how we can change our diets. This is not just a lack of availability and access. You're dealing with family practices and family traditions and customs. Folks need to become aware that our food system has changed.
As we traveled around Baltimore City, we found a number of small urban farming initiatives like Joyce Smith's CSA. In East Baltimore, at both Participation Park and the Duncan Street Community Garden, people are growing food for themselves and their community. There's a lot of potential for this type of small-scale production in Baltimore. Like Detroit and other post-industrial cities, Baltimore has many vacant lots, over 12,000. And although some of this land is poisoned with the waste of industry and former row houses, the land can be reclaimed and farmed. Many people in Baltimore seem genuinely excited about the urban farming movement. Look no further than the crowd at Stew, an event where money is raised for Baltimore organizations and guests enjoy a meal sourced from local ingredients. We spoke to Stew organizers Matt and Dane about the benefits of using local food.
The reason we use local food it's not just because it's great to buy local, it's just because it typically is a better product.
Almost 9 times out of 10 it's a better product.
Yeah.
And anytime as you know, as a chef, why would I not buy the better product? And it just happens to come from a couple miles away. Wow, that's fantastic. I'm supporting a local economy. I'm supporting someone who lives in my community.
The Baltimore City public school system has also realized the benefits of going local, so much so that they converted their 33-acre nature center just outside Baltimore City to a working farm. With 3 full acres now in production and a growing assortment of animals on the grounds, Great Kids Farm gives kids a chance to see firsthand how food grows. The Baltimore Montessori Public Charter School is going one step further, not only bringing its students to the Great Kids Farm, but also bringing a little bit of the farm to the school. We talked to Denzel Mitchell, the greening coordinator for the Montessori school.
This raised bed garden, which is our edible garden, which we've just started working with this spring. Each of the classrooms has their own bed to manage. This one here has garlic in it, so the garlic will be harvested at the height of summer, and then we'll use that in the student kitchen, so the kids kind of get to see that whole process. We have 2 beehives, affectionately called Ketchup and Mustard, to pollinate our trees and pollinate our plants. And then we have two chickens, 2 laying hens who lay eggs for us every day.
The students' enthusiasm for food is tangible, not only because of the gardens, but because food preparation is an important part of their education. Every day, 2 students from each elementary class come together to help cook a snack for the entire school. Students are taught about the nutrients in the snacks they make and are given a chance to cook more complicated foods like risotto and soups.
The children's response to this program has been tremendous. Just absolutely unbelievable how you could change a child's thinking about food and going home and asking their parents literally, can we go to the store and go buy Brussels sprouts because I love Brussels sprouts. I mean, that really does happen. It's been amazing.
From the Baltimore Montessori Public Charter School, we went to the Inner Harbor, where we found an intriguing companion to the urban agriculture movement, urban aquaculture. The University of Maryland's Center for Marine Biotechnology, COMB, has been developing sustainable methods of raising commercial-grade fish and shellfish right in Baltimore City. We spoke with John Stubblefield, a researcher working at COMB for 18 years.
Over the years, the Bay has changed a lot. We're demonstrating, such as in this facility, that you can actually grow sustainable seafood in an urban location. You know, we're in downtown Baltimore and we're producing food quality fish. We don't have to have a facility with a bunch of tanks that's located in some agricultural area. We can be very close to a distribution network such as BWI Airport, seafood areas such as the Jessup Retail Market, and you know, it can be done in old reclaimed brownfield buildings, old warehouses. You know, you don't have to go out and find land and build these facilities. You can use what exists. So now, to get away from taking resources from the bay and instead growing these same types of fish or shellfish in sustainable, biosecure systems. And so I think these are some of the things that biotechnology can contribute to the Chesapeake.
It was in the Inner Harbor that our journey into Baltimore's food ecology began. A lot has changed since the time of endless oysters and the first municipal markets. The rise of processed foods and the decline of Baltimore's economy have shaped the food system Baltimore has today. Overly dependent on fossil fuels and disconnected from the Chesapeake Bay region, this system fails to provide a healthy diet to all the city's residents and puts Baltimore's most financially vulnerable populations at higher risk of diabetes and heart disease. This system is ultimately unsustainable. Baltimore City farmers and aquaculturists are producing a diet much closer to that consumed in Baltimore at the beginning of the century, before the dawn of processed foods. With so much enthusiasm for the urban agriculture and aquaculture movements, with the enormous human potential of a city of over 500,000 people, with more than ample land for expansion, could urban agriculture and aquaculture allow Baltimore City to feed itself? Could Baltimore City provide its own people with equal access to fresh foods? We spoke to Kate Clancy, a visiting scholar at the Johns Hopkins University Center for a Livable Future.
Well, cities by definition have fairly large populations, and some of them, like New York, have very big populations. The amount of food that a person eats per year is about a ton per person per year. That's a lot of food, but the idea is urban agriculture is not meant to meet all of the requirements. It's only meant to meet some of the requirements of people's diets. And the thing that I think is most important to know is that proportionately the nutrient that we need most in our diets is carbohydrate. And carbohydrate, the major carbohydrate sources, it comes from many other things. The major carbohydrate source is wheat, corn, rice, etc. We're not going to grow a lot of wheat in cities, but we don't need to, because that's not the intent.
Although urban agriculture and aquaculture may be able to significantly supplement the diets of many Baltimoreans, it will take many years of hard work to reach this point. Hard work and time will also be needed to make the local food at farmers markets accessible to all. Until then, the majority of Baltimore City will have to depend on the paltry offerings of corner stores. But this is not to detract from the local food movement.
The promise of urban agriculture isn't about growing all of our food within the city limits and being this island of urbanites. You know, the promise of urban agriculture is creating connections between the wealth of our neighboring communities and our cities. And, you know, not only are we blessed in the Chesapeake Bay region because we have this incredible body of water that produces all of this bounty that butts right up against our city, but we have a climate where we can grow a fair amount of food year-round.
Greg Strella's take on urban agriculture as part of a larger system that works in tandem with surrounding rural communities points to what Kate Clancy sees as the promising model for food production, a regional food system.
The region that Baltimore is in, the larger region, and the region that many colleagues and myself have been focused on for the last 5 or 6 years, and much more intently just in the last couple of years, is the Northeast. And the Northeast is 12 states plus DC, and the states run from Maine to West Virginia. So Baltimore would be in that larger region. Regions are defined many ways. You can have small regions like the Chesapeake Bay region, and Baltimore's in that region too, but the larger region that we're thinking about. And the reason that we're looking at 12 states is that the total population of the Northeast is very high, including New York City. And if you think about, in the long term, for the actual food security of the region, it makes sense to think about this larger region. It crosses latitudes. That means there's a lot of diversity in the soil types, in the climate, in the kinds of things that can be grown. And by definition, a larger region will be able to supply more of the total need than a small local area can.
Growing, preparing, and eating food in Baltimore City brings people together, keeps money within the community, and teaches young and old about the benefits of eating healthy, fresh foods. In the end, it will be this better understanding of food that transforms our system. Baltimore City public schools and hardworking food advocates like Joyce Smith are educating a generation of consumers that will demand fresh, minimally processed foods, whether at supermarkets or on small-scale urban farms.
I have been at this work for 40 years. And I have never seen this much enthusiasm around food as I'm seeing today. I'm really hopeful about the future of food. I'm hopeful because there's so much interest in it.
Looking at Baltimore City and looking at all these vacant lots, getting with folks in the community, not just the pacification that I've seen. We have to get our city leaders or our politicians to become more supportive of the grassroots effort. Make some type of allocation where the community can use this to grow, and it needs to be a dialogue with community folks and community advocates that are doing things in a positive way and seeing the value of what they have to say. I just like to believe that we're going to be the model for the nation.